Happy Monday, everybody. As we all know, the servers are currently closed down for maintenance so that we can all enjoy looking at error screens during the Lightfall launch tomorrow. So I thought it would be fun to go through and talk about a few exotic weapons and armor pieces that might actually be pretty useful and synergize pretty well with Strand come Lightfall tomorrow, assuming you can actually log into the game. We're going to start with two exotic weapons first that I think might actually help you out a little bit, especially if you're going for the Legendary campaign, and then we'll move on to some armor pieces. First up, we have the Monte Carlo. This thing was awesome when it first came out, and honestly, I think it's a little underrated, especially if you're going for some sort of melee build and you don't necessarily need another exotic. This thing only helps. The Monte Carlo method is every time you deal damage, you get melee energy back, and on every kill, you have a chance to just fully refund your melee energy. Its secondary perk is the Markov chain, which is just basically an exotic version of Swashbuckler. And I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like when you have the Markov chain activated, the percentage chance to get your melee back on kills is higher than it is without the Markov chain activated. You can activate the Markov chain perk by simply either getting kills with the gun or stacking it straight up to 5 times by getting a melee kill. This works with either a regular melee or a ability melee or a ranged melee. Again, it's basically just an exotic version of Swashbuckler. Also, we know that in the Witch Queen, exotics got a buff against red bar enemies. And if I remember correctly, in Lightfall, the primary kinetic weapons are getting another buff against regular enemies. This weapon could be good for getting through some of the trash mob enemies in the Legendary campaign if you don't need another exotic in your special or power slot. Also, as we can see, it charges a ton of melee energy simply by hitting a target that has a lot of health. It's very fast, it's very fun. If you have a melee build that doesn't rely on things like tractor cannon, this is a pretty good one to fiddle around with. Let's move on to the second exotic weapon of choice, the Traveler's Chosen. Now, I know that this probably isn't the smartest idea to run through the Legendary campaign with, but let me tell you something. It's fun. The way it works is every time you get a kill with it, you get a stack of Gathering Light, and you can get up to 10 stacks. If you hold down your reload button, you will consume the stacks of Gathering Light, and it will recharge all of your abilities. 1/10 of the ability charge per stack of Gathering Light. Long story short, if you have 10 stacks, you get all your abilities back. If you get 5 stacks and you use it, you get half your abilities back. So, why do I bring this up? Well, we know that Bungie wants to focus a little bit more on the gunplay of the game and not really having as much ability spam, but this gun lets you ability spam. Just get a couple of kills, refresh your cooldowns, and spam all those abilities. This might work well with Strand, just because more abilities means more fun, especially with that grappling hook. Now let's move on to our first exotic armor piece to talk about, and that is the Sealed Ahamkara Grasps. Now, I know that you've probably either, 1, never heard of these things, or 2, deleted them as soon as you got them. They're not really phenomenal in any way, shape, or form. There are other exotics that build way better into different loadouts, different builds, different subclasses. But when I was thinking about armor pieces that would probably work well with Strand and Lightfall, I was thinking stuff that helps you with your neutral game. So I decided to bring these up. There's nothing super fancy about this exotic. Simply, if you deal melee damage, you reload your currently equipped weapon. It's really that simple. This works for regular melee attacks and charged melee attacks and ranged melee attacks. It doesn't have to be an actual punch to the face. And you just get a weapon reload. It does also buff the airborne effectiveness, but we're talking about PvE right now, so it doesn't really matter that much, in my opinion, but that's just me. I'm not sure how different perks and strand abilities will synergize together on weapons, but I have a hunch that if there's anything that revolves around sort of a strand melee build, or just wanting as much ammo in a gun as possible at any given point in time, this exotic isn't necessarily a terrible idea. It's just not also good, if that makes sense. There is one interesting factor about this exotic that makes it a little better than you initially think, and that's where if you're using a glaive and you hit somebody with the glaive melee attack, it auto-reloads all the glaive ammo. This could be good, this could be bad. It kind of depends on if you like to play with glaives or not. And if you're not using any other exotic for your build.
Hi, yes. My audio recording bugged out here, but I still wanted to talk about the exotic leg armor, the bombardiers.
When they first came out, you just dodged and you left the bomb and it did flat damage. Didn't matter what subclass you were playing. But it was buffed after a while to deal a specific type of effect on the bomb you left behind, depending on your subclass. If you're Arc, the grenade blinds your opponents. If you're Solar, the grenade scorches. If you're Void, the grenade suppresses. And if you're Stasis, the grenade slows your opponents. Now this is cool and all, but obviously it doesn't have any sort of effect going with Strand currently, but here's to hoping that they add an effect to it and this becomes a viable option, because, you know, honestly, they're pretty fun to use, and I wonder if it would affect one of those suspended or tangled things with Strand, or maybe you dodge and it leaves like a little threadling behind or something like that. I don't know, but whatever the case is, here's to hoping that it gets an additional perk with Strand and that there's probably some sort of dodge build you can do that involves the bombardiers and different fragments and aspects, and that'll be fun. Next up we have the Frosties. These exotic boots help you by boosting your cooldowns to all of your abilities when you are sprinting. That's it. That's the whole gameplay loop of these exotics. You can literally just run into a wall if you want, and it will proc the exotic effect, and you'll gain your ability energy back. It's not a huge boost to the cooldowns, and if you're strafing from side to side, ducking behind the cover, and shooting enemies, it doesn't use the effect, and so you don't get that additional cooldown energy. But as long as you're sprinting, you do get the cooldown energy, so this does help your neutral game with getting your abilities back and stuff like that. And here's a fun fact about the Frosties, but they actually boost your sprint speed. The Stompies definitely make you feel like you're moving faster, and they affect your jump distance and height and stuff like that, but they don't actually boost your sprint speed. The Frosties, on the other hand, will boost your sprint speed. Just a fun little fact. For some other exotics that I forgot to get footage of, here are some honorable mentions. First we have the Assassin's Cowl, which gives you health and invisibility on a charged melee kill, and with the Hunter's little kunai knife thing being able to catch it, hit multiple enemies, and give you extra melee energy back on the catch, this could be pretty good for just straight up survivability. Getting health back and going invisible is always a benefit, especially when it comes to harder level activities like the Legendary Campaign. Another one that you could spring for to affect your neutral game is the Dragon Shadow. Every time you dodge, it reloads every single weapon you have, and it increases your movement speed and weapon handling for a short amount of time. A fun fact about this movement speed buff, it actually recharges your dodge faster. It acts as like a flat buff to your stats. So if you have like 90 mobility and you dodge with the Dragon's Shadow for the next few seconds, I can't remember how long it is, 5 to 10 seconds. For the next 5 to 10 seconds, you have 100 mobility, which means your dodge recharges faster. So again, if there's some sort of dodge build and melee build that people can do, or weapon build, something that revolves around dodging, the Dragon Shadow is a good neutral game exotic that a lot of hunters who have played PvP will understand why it's so good at affecting your neutral game. Here's one that I'm not sure if it'll actually work or not, but when I saw it, it kind of sprang to mind just because, well, maybe it'll work. The Ophidia Spath gives you 2 knife charges. That's it. You get double melees, and it only works on your Solar subclass, but we're getting another subclass that has a sort of throwing knife-ish, I know it's a kunai or whatever, or a rope dart but it's a throwing knife-ish melee, and so maybe the Ophidia Spathe gives you a second knife charge. I don't know if it'll work, but I imagine that Wednesday night or Thursday is the soonest time that the servers will be open for me to get into the game and actually test it out. And the last one I have to mention is the 6 Coyote. This one's very simple. You put on the chest peaks, you get an extra dodge. Again, if there's any sort of dodge builds that come with the Hunter Strand subclass, having an extra dodge is never really an issue. The last exotic armor piece that I totally forgot to mention earlier, but that I'm pretty sure I have footage of, and if I do I'll show it on the screen right now, is the Radiant Dance Machines. This exotic was an absolute meme when it came out because it let you dodge multiple times as long as you were near another enemy for like 5 to 10 seconds, and Bungie might have forgotten to test them out on a stasis subclass with Winter's Shroud, so when they first came out, you could dodge around people indefinitely for 10 seconds and just keep freezing and shattering them by just spamming a single button. It was really funny, and I will admit that it was 100% broken, but you know, everything has to have its light in the day. Again, if there's any sort of strong dodge type build to get your melees back or to proc certain abilities with Strand, the Radiant Dance Machines are going to be pretty good because they let you dodge pretty much like 6 or so times in the 10 seconds you get to dodge. And if there's some sort of dodge effect, or you just need to get your melee back multiple times in a row for your melee build, this will be a good exotic to use. Anyways, that's all I've got for now. I hope you guys have a good rest of the day. I hope that you will be able to get into the servers tomorrow when Lightfall drops, even though I highly doubt it based on my experience the past 3 expansions. But hey, here's to another great year of Destiny content. Toodles!